Tell me about Eumaious in book 14.
He's a slave?
He's a slave.
Yeah, he's a slave. When Odysseus arrives at his house, he greets him really well. Although he doesn't recognize him as his former master, he still receives him well, and he tells him the story how he became a slave, how he got kidnapped and got to the city, and then after that, his former slave brings him to his house, the castle.
Hold on. I'm gonna keep slowing you down here because this is fun stuff, and we don't want to rush. We're getting there. All in good time. Eumaious. Eumaious is his slave.
Former slave.
Well, he's still a slave.
Oh, yeah.
He belongs to the estate. Technically now, I guess he would be, and of course this is the central conflict, technically now he would probably be, I guess, Telemachus' slave. But Telemachus doesn't know if his father is dead, so who's the man of the house is a big mystery. But think about this. Eumaious, with this mystery of, well, you know, do I really have a boss? You know, what's the normal response then? If you go to work and your boss isn't there, do you work as hard as you might normally? Well, okay, I'm not going to personalize it. I'm sure you do. I'll make it even more immediate. If you show up to this class and I am not sitting here, do you open your book and begin studiously reading? Again, I'm not going to personalize it too much. I'm sure you would. But most people, I think it's fair to say, probably wouldn't. Eumaious does. Eumaious keeps herding the pigs. This is what he does. This is his job. He is the good slave. He misses his master. He talks about his master being lost. And oh, how much he wishes his master would come home. As a slave, he seems to be pining away for the return of his master. Now, he doesn't particularly like, you know, the interlopers, the suitors coming, and let's face it, he is probably working harder to provide fresh pork for 50 suitors than he is if he just had like the one king home. I mean, it's not a particularly large family. If he had to worry about feeding one king, a queen, their teenage son, and the king's old father, that's that's not a lot of meat to produce. But now he's got to be, shucking these things into town for 50 hungry layabouts. That's a lot more work. But he never complains about the work. He just complains about the absent master and the interlopers. He is the loyal slave. I always find him a bit over the top. Where do I want to read that? Odysseus sat down, and this is like line 50, sat down and was delighted at this welcome. Eumaious practices Xenia. He observes the customs and traditions of society, even those customs and traditions that make him a slave. He practices Xenia. He invites this pathetic old beggar, Odysseus, in. The noble swineherd heaped up cushy brushwood and spread a furry goatskin over it, his own bed blanket, warm and thick. Odysseus sat down and was delighted at his welcome, rolling out the red carpet for this bum who just showed up on his doorstep. He said, "May Zeus and all the deathless gods reward you with your heart's desire because you welcomed me so willingly." And you, Eumaious, answered, "One must honor guests and foreigners and strangers, even those much poorer than oneself. Zeus watches over beggars and guests and strangers." he observes the gods. He practices the culture, he observes normal piety. What I have to give is small, but I will give it gladly. Life is like this for slaves. We live in fear when younger men have power over us. My real Lord is kept from home by gods, always the victim. He would have taken care of me and given what kindly owners give to loyal slaves, a house with lands and wife whom many men would want as recompense for years of labor. Isn't that a rosy view of slavery? Another translation that I particularly love, particularly in this, it has some other problems and whatever, but like 20 years before the one that's 20 years old now, so like a full generation or two ago, there was a guy named Fitzgerald. No, he was actually way more than 20 years that he wrote that. Fitzgerald has this thing where you see this direct address that repeats, where the narrator says, but you, Eumaious, you said this. You know, in response, you, Eumaious, you didn't get depressed or whatever. And he's always going on with Eumaious. Directly. You. Now, first of all, this puts the reader in the position of Eumaious. Because you read the word you and you say, me? I'm suddenly the slave in this perspective? Well, gee, that kind of changes the way I'm looking at the world. Would I react the same way? Personally, I would not. I would probably not be this loyal. My favorite translation now, or the Fitzgerald, all those lines is, oh, Eumaious, oh, my swineherd. And it's just this euphoric, melodious call out saying, oh, my swineherd. And it's just silly. But you see that over and over again, and it's so over the top that I can't help but wonder if it's intentionally so. Because everything Eumaious does or everything he says sounds way over the top. He's just too loyal, too good a slave. Is that something that we can really believe in? Should we? I don't know. But by creating that space, by just going a little bit over reality, I think the poem is hinting that, well, you know, there might not be a perfect relationship there after all. What is underneath that character? What is underneath that relationship? What can I deduce from it? Maybe I should just take some time thinking about it, exercising my reason and examining maybe not the institution itself, because slavery was a real thing for a long time, but maybe just to be aware that, well, yeah, this guy is really loyal, but is that realistic to expect? Maybe your slaves, if you have slaves, maybe they're going to be a little bit less loyal. And maybe you should think about that. Maybe you should treat them a little differently. Maybe you should think about the world a little differently. This creates that space. So Odysseus, in having this little sit-down chat, sort of, basically this is the world's oldest episode of Undercover Boss. He gets to interrogate his slave and find out about him. On line 115, then Odysseus said, friend, who bought you? He knows damn well who bought him. Who bought you? This rich, noble man that you described. Who is he? Tell me more. Odysseus, the ego guy, wants to hear some stories about how great he is. He found a guy who's like, you know, really, really loyal to Odysseus. So now, tell me more about that. Who is this Odysseus whom you speak of? You say he died in the war for Agamemnon's honor. Perhaps I knew him, since he must be famous. Now he wants to hear his slave tell him stories about, you know, what might have what other people are talking about. What are they saying about me? Come on, give me a little idea. Zeus and the other gods will be aware if I have seen him and can bring you needs. He traveled widely. He's trying to test Eumaious' loyalty. He's trying to use Eumaious to get an idea of what people know about him, what people might think about him. Do they think he's dead? Do they think he's coming back? What is the scuttlebutt? But he's not confiding in Eumaious. Eumaious is pretty much already laid out to Odysseus that, yeah, I'll do anything for the boss. So why not take him into your confidence right then? Well, that's not the Odyssean way. First, you really got to test him because you never know what he could be lying about. All that, oh, my swineherd stuff could be Odysseus sitting there saying, yeah, I don't know if I can believe this. This looks suspicious. Nobody is this happy to be a slave.
He's hoping to get land and stuff.
Yeah.
So
And
that's why he's so loyal.
yeah. What else do we learn about Eumaious though when Eumaious starts to tell him his story?
He says that that line when he says, I'm forced to be like a slave of younger men. And maybe that represents how that the title itself is.
He resents being told what to do by the suitors, the younger men, instead of the king. I'm fine with taking orders by the respected and rightful, fully grown king. But not all these little pissants that are running around telling me to, bring him something to eat. He also, when he tells him his story, talks about how Odysseus's own mother took a special interest in him when he was younger and raised him with this mysterious sister. So, in a way, Eumaious has a certain royal pedigree. He's not just a common slave. He's actually, one of the good ones. He's not one of the common. He's special. So he deserves to be treated differently. You can see little hints of personality come out, however. Again, it's never a simple portrait. It's always a little complicated. Around line 410 or so. In came the herdsmen. They drove the pigs into the usual pens to rest. There rose a mighty din of grunting pigs. The noble swineherd addressed his men. The noble swineherd. Now that is both literal because he has this sort of quasi-pedigree, and it's also ironic because a noble swineherd. It's complicated. The noble swineherd addressed his men, bring out the best pig for our guest who comes from distant lands, embracing foreigners, Xenia, and let us all enjoy ourselves. We suffer in bitter toil for those white-tusked pigs, while others eat the food we labor for and give us nothing. Good God, he sounds like Bernie Sanders. This is populism here. This is class resentment right here. This is not the loyal swineherd exactly. He's starting to slip out little chunks of personality here and there. Odysseus tests him one last time. Odysseus, they're going to bed, and Odysseus, again, the guy is pretty much proven a lapdog to the memory of his former master by this point. But Odysseus can never quite trust anyone. So he tests him. And all right, we're getting ready to go to bed. Yeah, it's a little nippy in here, and I came in here basically naked. And then he tells a story, of course, about how he was given a cloak by a great gentleman. And the hint is pretty unsubtle. But Eumaious comes up and he says, okay, here. You will get a cloak. And the testing is driven home because it's not just the one time, it's at least twice. And if you think about it and you read into some of the subtleties of their conversation, Odysseus is throughout poking him and trying to see, well, all right, you know, how much can I really trust this guy? What do I know about him? How can I use him? And it's a complicated relationship.